75 years ago this week, the largest seaborne invasion in history took place on the beaches and in the towns of Normandy, France, in an operation codenamed Overlord, but better known today simply as D-Day. The courage, devotion to duty, and the skill in battle shown by nearly 160,000 soldiers, sailors, and airmen who crossed the English Channel that day have been memorialized in several movies, including classics like The Big Red One, Band of Brothers, and of course, Saving Private Ryan. But for me, the definitive D-Day movie will always be the 1962 classic, The Longest Day. So join me as I explore some of the behind-the-scenes stories and several of the true heroes that played a part in making The Longest Day.
Only two kinds of people are going to stay on this beach. Those that are already dead and those that are going to die. Now get off your butts!
Alright, well, let's start with the source material. And The Longest Day was based on a book with the same title by Cornelius Ryan. Now, Ryan crafted the book after he and his researchers completed more than 3,000 interviews. And like we see in the movie, the book presents the history through the stories of a cross-section of people involved with the invasion, including U.S., Canadian, British, French, and German officers and civilians. Now, the movie rights to Ryan's book cost producer Darryl Zanuck $175,000, but Ryan was such an authority on the invasion that Zanuck also signed him on to write the screenplay. Now, Zanuck made this deal despite the fact that he and Ryan reportedly disliked each other from the very beginning. Now, the job of getting the two of them to work together landed on associate producer Elmo Williams, who helped smooth out their disagreements so the project could keep moving forward. Now, in addition to Cornelius Ryan, Zanuck asked other screenwriters to help on the final script, including Roman Gary, David Purcell, Jack Seddon, and James Jones. In fact, this is the first screenwriting credit for James Jones, who up to this point was known primarily as a novelist, having written From Here to Eternity 10 years earlier. It's hard to imagine now, but making The Longest Day with its $10 million budget was a real gamble for 20th Century Fox. Part of that risk was that Fox was making Cleopatra at the same time, and with that film's unprecedented $40 million budget, there were concerns that if both films failed, it could ruin the entire studio. Ultimately, Cleopatra did well at the box office, but not well enough to earn back its costs. Fortunately, The Longest Day turned out to be one of the biggest hits of the year and helped to offset Cleopatra's losses. Zanuck didn't want The Longest Day to be just another war movie. One of the innovations he added to the production was to have each group speak their own language in the movie, meaning the Germans spoke German, the French spoke French, and the Americans and the British spoke English. Now, The Longest Day was one of the very first war movies made by an American studio to use this technique. In fact, even though it's an American movie, English is not heard until 10 minutes into the movie.
You expect us to eat this slop again? I don't care what you do with it, Mac. Eat it.
That's not to mean that Zanuck didn't hedge his bets on this. The scenes with the non-English speakers were also shot with the actors performing in English. A second version of the movie was made with these English performances, but that version is rarely shown now. The version where each group speaks their own language is the better known and more often seen version. As part of the focus on accurately telling each side's story, and to create a more sympathetic perception of each of the different groups, Darryl Zanuck had Englishman Ken Anakin direct the British segments. The American parts were handled by American action specialist Andrew Martin, and German Bernard Wicki took on the scenes with the German army officers. Even with 3 directors on the team, there was still more work to be done. And to help out, Zanuck brought in Gerd Oswald to direct the parachute drop scenes, and Zanuck himself even directed some of the pickup scenes to keep the production moving along. Zanuck and Wicki deliberately tried not to present the Germans in the stereotypical style used in earlier movies. Phrases like Sieg Heil were kept out of the script, although they can be seen written on a bunker wall in Oysterhound. Also, Adolf Hitler doesn't make an appearance in the movie, which is appropriate since during the real invasion, Hitler had taken a sleeping pill and slept through the start of the D-Day landings. With the creative team in place, the next focus was on getting the right gear for the battle scenes. One of Zanek's biggest worries was that he wouldn't be able to find any working German Messerschmitts, which strafed the beach during the invasion, or any British Spitfires, which chased the Messerschmitts away. As the filming date got closer and closer, he finally found 2 Messerschmitts that were being used by the Spanish Air Force, and 2 Spitfires that were still on active duty with the Belgian Air Force. Zanuck rented all 4 of the aircraft for the invasion scenes. And while clearing a section of the Normandy beach near Pointe du Hoc, the film crew found a tank used in the invasion buried in the sand. They cleaned the tank up and used it for the British invasion scenes. Unfortunately, Zanuck wasn't able to find the right kind of gliders that were used on D-Day, so he reached out to the company that made the originals and commissioned them to make some new gliders for the movie. Actually, renting a fleet of ships, though, wasn't in the budget, but Zanuck worked with the Navy to get approval to film 22 ships from the US 6th Fleet while they were sailing off the coast of Corsica. The only issue was that while shooting this footage, they had to be careful not to get the aircraft carriers in the shots, since aircraft carriers were not involved in the actual invasion force. All of these steps helped give the film a more authentic look, but the gear wasn't the only element that helped make the film seem more real. Zanuck also reached out to people who had actually fought on D-Day to help behind and in front of the camera. One of the best examples of this was Richard Todd, who played Major John Howard, the leader of the unit that captured and helped hold Pegasus Bridge. Todd was actually one of the soldiers who helped take and hold the bridge during D-Day. In fact, he was originally offered the chance to play himself in the film, but jokingly replied that he didn't want a part that small, so he asked to play the commanding officer instead. Now, there's a lot of unit-specific references in The Longest Day, and Todd has one of his own. As he's leading the assault on the bridge, Todd, as Major Howard, cries out to his men,
"Up the oxen bucks! Up the oxen bucks!"
Up the Oxen Bucks refers to the Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire Light Infantry, the group he and his men belonged to. Another insider reference happens in the scene just after the unit captures the bridge, where Todd worries about a counterattack. A soldier suggests that the paratroopers will help, but Todd replies dismissively that the paratroopers are always late.
It's only a matter of time before they counterattack.
What about the paratroopers?
Well, 7th Para might not get here for hours.
This was a private joke, as Todd himself had been a member of the 7th Parachute Battalion on D-Day and did help relieve the forces on the bridge. The 7th Parachute Battalion did eventually arrive, and Todd and his men joined Major Howard to defend the bridge. In fact, during the scene of Todd as Howard, waiting for additional reinforcements, an officer in a para beret next to Todd is an actor playing the real Richard Todd. One more interesting overlap between real life and the film is the beret Todd is wearing. Although he changed the cap badge to that of Major Howard's regiment, the beret that Todd wears in this movie is the one he actually wore on D-Day. The fact that Richard Todd was even alive to appear in The Longest Day was thanks to a fluke of fate. Just before the invasion flights took off, Todd was moved onto another plane. The plane he had been scheduled to fly in was shot down during the invasion, and everyone inside was killed. Now, Richard Todd wasn't the only D-Day veteran to appear in the movie. Joseph Lowe, who plays Sparrow, scaled the Pointe du Hoc cliffs at Omaha Beach as a 22-year-old private, and he did it again in The Longest Day. Donald Houston, who plays an RAF pilot alongside Richard Burton, was actually an RAF pilot on D-Day. And John Robinson, who plays Admiral Ramsey, took part in the D-Day invasion as a member of the UK's Reconnaissance Corps. Even the character who calls the homing pigeons on Juno Beach traitors when they appear to fly east towards Germany was there on D-Day.
The other way! Damn traitors!
He's Canadian journalist Charles Lynch, who landed with the Canadian troops and covered the landings for Reuters. And there were many veterans who served in other parts of the world that appeared in the film, including Eddie Albert, who played Colonel Thompson. Albert fought in the Pacific and won the Bronze Star in 1943, when during the invasion of Tarawa, he rescued 47 Marines and supervised the rescue of 30 more while under heavy enemy machine gun fire. And it wasn't just the Americans and British veterans who played key roles. Hans Christian Bleck, who played Werner Pluskat, was a veteran of the German army, though he fought on the Eastern Front. Making an invasion as big as D-Day look real required a lot of people to fill the scenes, so in addition to the actors, the US, British, and French all assigned soldiers to help out as extras in the battle scenes. In all, about 23,000 soldiers were used. So many troops were brought in for filming that producer Darryl Zanuck technically commanded more troops while making The Longest Day than any single general commanded during the actual invasion. Even trained soldiers had their limits though, and during the filming of the landing at Omaha Beach, it looked like the extras might mutiny rather than jump out of the landing craft into the cold water. Robert Mitchum, who played General Norm Cota, finally got frustrated enough with them that he decided to set the example and jumped into the water first, at which point the soldiers had no choice but to jump in after him. One of the more unbelievable moments in The Longest Day is when Lord Lovat's commandos stormed ashore accompanied by a bagpiper. Amazingly, this actually happened, and the piper was Bill Millen. Despite it being against English regulations for pipers to be on the front lines, Lord Lovat convinced, or well, to be exact, he ordered Millen to uphold his Scottish roots and accompany the commandos. Wearing a kilt and armed only with his black knife sheathed on his right calf, the real Bill Millen played Highland Laddie, The Road to the Isles, and All the Bluebonnets Are Over the Border as the unit attacked on Sword Beach. Now, Millen claimed that after the invasion, he spoke with 2 German snipers who told him they didn't shoot at him because they thought he'd gone mad. And following that, Millen was often referred to as the Mad Piper. Today, Millen's set of pipes is a featured exhibit at the Dawlish Museum in Devon. The piper we see playing the part of Millen in The Longest Day is Pipe Major Leslie de Laspey, who at the time was Pipe Major of the London Scottish Pipe Band and personal piper to the Queen. Another artifact from the actual battle that made it into the movie is the shillelagh Kenneth More carried while playing Captain Colin Maud. The real Captain Maud loaned the shillelagh to More himself to use in the film. However, despite having the authentic shillelagh, the portrayal of Captain Maud contains one of the few inaccuracies in The Longest Day, and it has to do with Maud's dog. In the real battle, Captain Maud's dog, Winnie, was actually a German Shepherd. The dog was changed to an English Bulldog for contrast because German Major Werner Pluskat also has a German Shepherd in the film. Another memorable prop from The Longest Day are the crickets that John Wayne demonstrated to the troops.
1 click is to be answered by 2 clicks.
These toys, which were really used during the actual invasion, were made by J. Hudson & Company, a whistle manufacturer in Birmingham, England. The company is still in existence and has become famous for their Acme whistles, and they still produce an exact replica of the D-Day crickets using the original tooling. And one thing many people remember about The Longest Day are the dummy paratroopers shown in the movie and referred to as Rupert.
Bye, Rupert! Do your duty for God, King, and your country!
These dummies were also real, and about 500 of them were dropped on the eve of D-Day to distract and divert the enemy. However, D-Day was not the first time these para-dummies had been used. The Germans themselves used dummies like Rupert over Holland and Belgium during the opening of the Battle for France. Now, the real Ruperts were not as detailed as the ones shown in The Longest Day. The actual Ruperts were canvas or burlap sacks filled with sand and decorated with boots, helmets, and sometimes a lifelike doll face. And because they were designed to self-destruct when they hit the ground, very few of the original para-dummies still exist. Now, as production got underway, Fox executives were nervous when Darryl Zanuck decided to shoot the film in black and white. When Zanuck was asked how audiences would distinguish it from newsreel footage, Zanuck replied, "Don't worry, I'll put a star in every shot." In fact, The Longest Day features 6 Academy Award winners: Red Buttons, Sean Connery, Henry Fonda, Edmund O'Brien, Rod Steiger, and John Wayne. It also had an additional 11 Academy Award nominees, including Richard Burton, Sal Mineo, Robert Mitchum, Robert Bryan, and George Segal. Even in a cast of more than 40 stars, John Wayne as Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin Vandervoort took top billing. Wayne's age was a point of criticism at the time the movie came out, since the real Benjamin Vandervoort was 12 years younger than Wayne, and on D-Day Vandervoort was just 27 years old, while Wayne was already 54 when the movie was filmed. The role was a pretty good one for Wayne. He was coming off of disappointing box office of The Alamo, a film he produced, directed, and starred in. The cost overruns on The Alamo meant Wayne needed to recoup some of his losses. He negotiated top billing and a payday of $250,000, all for just 4 days of shooting. John Wayne wasn't the only actor singled out for being older than the real soldiers would have been. At 52, Robert Ryan was 15 years older than General James M. Gavin had been on D-Day. And Richard Burton said he felt both he and Donald Houston were too old to play RAF pilots. During his national service in the RAF, Burton says he never saw a pilot older than 30. Many of the roles were essentially cameos, where the actors would come in for a few days, shoot their scenes, and head back home. In the case of Roddy McDowall, he took a role out of sheer boredom. He had been in Italy for the filming of Cleopatra, but became so frustrated with the numerous delays during its production that he begged Darryl Zanuck for a part in The Longest Day just so he could do some work. Sean Connery took a role too, but asked that his scenes be filmed quickly so he could get to Jamaica in time to star in Dr. No. According to director Ken Anakin, Zanuck took a dislike to Sean Connery. Zanuck was quoted as saying, "That limey mumbles his lines and looks like a slob." After filming his scenes, Sean Connery did head down to Jamaica to make his debut as James Bond. But Connery wasn't the only actor in The Longest Day who would go on to appear in a Bond film. 2 future Bond villains were also in the cast. Kurt Jurgens played Karl Stromberg in The Spy Who Loved Me, and Gert Frobe would later go on to play Ulrich Goldfinger in Goldfinger. In The Longest Day, Kurt Jurgens played General Blumentritt. In real life, Jurgens actually been imprisoned by the Nazis. He had been critical of National Socialism in his native Germany. In 1944, he was sent to an internment camp in Hungary as a political unreliable. Now, it's always fun to imagine how the films would have been different if the director's first choices for some roles had taken the parts. For example, the team really wanted Dwight Eisenhower to play himself in the film. Unfortunately, they abandoned the idea because they thought Eisenhower looked too old to play such a recognizable part. Henry Grace was picked to fill the role of General Eisenhower instead, despite the fact that he was not an actor. His remarkable resemblance to Eisenhower got him the role. Well, maybe it's a good thing that Eisenhower wasn't picked to play himself. There are reports that when Eisenhower saw the movie, he walked out after only a few minutes, frustrated by the inaccuracies he saw in the film. Another what-if is John Wayne's role, which was originally offered to Charlton Heston. William Holden was also offered the role, but turned it down as he was exhausted after finishing Satan Never Sleeps, The Counterfeit Traitor, and The Lion. Brigitte Bardot and Marina Vladi turned down the role of French resistance fighter Janine Boitard. Ultimately, the role went to Irina Demick, who happened to be producer Darryl Zanuck's girlfriend at the time. And Christopher Lee, who fought in the war as an intelligence officer with the RAF, auditioned for any role he could get. Despite being a veteran officer, he was turned down because the producers felt he didn't look enough like a military officer. One other casting issue that got headlines was the absence of any African American actors in the film. In 1963, the NAACP accused Hollywood studios of racial discrimination and used The Longest Day as an example. Approximately 1,700 African American soldiers took part in the actual D-Day landings, but none were shown in the film. Shooting the movie was a challenge in a number of ways, some legitimate and some not so legitimate. For example, just before shooting began in Corsica, a man claiming that he represented the beach owners approached Darryl Zanuck. He demanded a $15,000 payment, or else the owners would drive modern cars along the beach and ruin the shots. Zanuck paid the money, but it was later discovered to be a scam since there are no private beaches in Corsica. Zanuck eventually got his money back plus damages, but only after an 8-year lawsuit. In addition to the challenges of con men, the production also had to worry about nudists while shooting the beach scenes. There was a nudist camp just 2 miles from the beach where they were shooting, so the crew posted signs asking the nudists to stay away from the water during production. The set could also be a dangerous place to be. During shooting in St. Maria Glace, traffic was stopped, stores were closed, and the power was shut down to make it safer for the paratroopers to land during the night drop scenes. even with those precautions, the lights and fake gunfire made the jumps difficult, and only one or two of the jumpers managed to land in the square. Several of the stuntmen performing the jumps suffered injuries, including one jumper who broke both his legs during his landing. Ultimately, the producers stopped using real jumps and instead dropped the paratroopers from high cranes. These same issues affected the real paratroopers on D-Day too. It's estimated that only about 6% of the paratroopers hit their landing targets, and as much as 60% of the men and equipment were lost across the fields of Normandy. One of the paratroopers whose story was shown in the film is Private John Steele of the 82nd Airborne F Company, as played by Red Buttons. Private Steele really did land on the St. Mary Glace bell tower. He hung there for about 2 hours, pretending to be dead, before the Germans took him prisoner. Later on, he escaped from the Germans and rejoined his division when U.S. troops of the 3rd Battalion 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment attacked the village, capturing 30 Germans and killing another 11. Steele was awarded the Bronze Star for Valor and the Purple Heart for being wounded in combat. Since the war, Private Steele has become sort of a local celebrity. On the 50th anniversary of D-Day, a dummy on a parachute was hung up on the tower in his memory, and it's still there. He and other paratroopers also appear in a stained glass window in the church that he once hung from. A chance meeting helped Red Buttons get the part of Private Steele. Daryl Zanuck cast Red Buttons in the part after running into him in a Paris cafe. Music plays a big part in The Longest Day, especially the theme song, which can be heard in various forms throughout the film. Now, after the film was released, the song, which was written by Paul Anka, was adopted as the regimental march of the Canadian Airborne Regiment from 1968 through 1995. In addition to the theme song, throughout the movie, a drum can occasionally be heard in the background. It hits 3 high notes and then a 4th note that's lower. In addition to being the opening notes of Beethoven's 5th Symphony, the notes also represent the 3 dots and a dash of Morse code for the letter V, as in V for victory. In fact, the film starts off with these drums, setting an ominous tone for the film to come. And perhaps so as not to disrupt the mood the film was trying to set from the very start, Fox decided not to show their famous logo at the start of the film. When Fox released Patton several years later, they repeated the strategy, letting the film go straight into the story without the logo appearing on the screen first. Even though the film has a documentary feel to it, there were some elements shown that weren't exactly true to the real event. For example, in the movie, the German soldiers defending the coast appeared to be seasoned soldiers. During the real invasion, many of the German soldiers at Normandy were young boys from the Hitler Youth and old men from reserve regiments. Most of the core fighting units had been moved to other locations thanks to the Allies' disinformation campaigns. And some locations of the movie are still around to see today. A great example is from the scene of the French commando assault in Ouistreham. That scene was filmed in the nearby town of Port-en-Bessin. One of the buildings shown in that scene originally said Bazar de Port-en-Bessin, but the town name was painted over to say Ouistreham for filming. Now, after the movie was completed, the original Bazar de Port-en-Bessin lettering was restored on the building. However, after more than 50 years of weathering, the paint has faded. Today, both the Port-en-Bessin and Ouistreham lettering can be seen on the building. Another memorable scene was the battle at the casino at Ouistreham. While researching the scene, screenwriter Roman Gray discovered that even though the casino was mentioned in Cornelius Ryan's book, it had already been destroyed by June 6, 1944. However, the casino sets were already built, so the scene stayed in, despite not being 100% accurate. The actual building used for the casino in the movie was really a hotel that marked the division between the Gold and Omaha beaches. By 1961, the hotel had been set for demolition, so its destruction was used as part of the movie. Now, once the film was complete, Fox was planning on just doing a quick, wide release to earn some cash they needed to offset their pre-release losses from Cleopatra. Upset with this strategy, Daryl Zanuck threatened to take The Longest Day over to Warner Brothers if Fox didn't do a proper roadshow release. Since Fox needed The Longest Day to be a hit, they complied with Zanuck's demand and gave the film a larger release. The film was a huge hit for Fox, and was the highest grossing black and white film for the next 30 years, beaten out in 1993 by another movie set during World War II, Schindler's List. Now, in addition to delivering some great box office receipts, The Longest Day also scored at the Academy Awards. The film was nominated for 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, and it won 2 Oscars for Best Cinematography and Best Special Effects. And there you have it, my list of facts about the 1962 classic, The Longest Day. If you'd like to learn more about D-Day and all the heroics that happened that day and throughout World War II, I highly recommend making a visit to the National World War II Museum in New Orleans. And to all the soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, and Coast Guardsmen out there, active duty and retired, thank you for your service.